Scouser.
So we kind of talked about it, and honestly, like you look at this lineup, guys. I don't think it's rocket science to anyone. We kind of talked about it in the pre-match show with Maka and Mateusz. I think you look at this lineup, Bickler, today, which I don't think anybody guessed this lineup like 4 or 5 days ago. And we'll talk about the situations behind it and stuff. But I think the concerns were very obvious. What was the first thing you thought of when you saw this lineup?
Well, I mean, the 3 words that I responded on Discord, we can't read out loud on here. But basically, like, I mean, I think the thing that jumps out is right in the middle that we're starting a 37-year-old in midfield, and then you just work your way back and you see Phillips and just try not to, like, put your hand through a computer monitor. I don't understand this at all. And I know that this was just a crazy week from an injury standpoint. Every day somebody was going down in training or pulling up with something apparently. I just don't understand what the point of having players on the bench as precautionary subs. Like Gomez and Henderson are precautionary. Like, what's the point of having them if you're not going to start them and their replacements are so subpar? Like, I just do not understand it. Like, and that's no disrespect to Milner, because, I mean, Milner, for all intents and purposes, has been one of our better players so far this year. That's part of the problem. I just do not understand how we're in a position going into this year. We're starting a 37-year-old in midfielder. We're now down to our 4th choice striker. We still don't have a backup for Mo Salah. There's no right wing depth. And there's absolutely no depth in it. I don't understand. I don't get it. Like, what? Like, this has been an issue for 3 years, and we still haven't addressed it. I don't understand it. And I keep hearing about how we just have to wait for the right player. Well, the right player is the one that's available. So let's start there. Let's start with somebody who's available and then work our way backwards. Because right now, it just appears like Jurgen Klopp is very stuck on a few players that are unachievable targets right now, and the team is suffering for it.
Gally, do you understand it? Because Victor doesn't. Can you explain to Victor, or can you explain to any of us? I guess, like, I think essentially it's one that I do not agree with, but this is how Klopp rolls, where when we have players like this, where we will not be able to play them 90 minutes, he would rather put them on the bench and not risk him if needed, as opposed to, starting him and then hopefully putting the game away and then taking them out. I realize the latter is a bit riskier and not guaranteed, but we see this over and over again. I just felt personally on a day like today, I guess it'd be a different story if Gomez goes in 10 minutes, Gomez comes out injured. Maybe then we're saying, why did you risk Gomez? But either way, but what do you think of that? Because these guys, if they're good enough to be on the bench, should he not have been out there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they were okay enough to play because they came in the match. They came in at some point when we needed them. And for me, that means that they were fit enough to play today, and then therefore they should have started. And with 5 substitutes, I'd rather get the first 20 minutes and find out that he's not fit enough to play rather than play Phillips and find out everything we thought we knew, which was if it comes down to a one-on-one foot race, Zaha is going to score. I mean, they had one opportunity to score in the first half, and they buried it. And really, we're lucky that they didn't have the second one. And it might have been just a really different match right from the beginning. And for me, the fact that Klopp continues to go back to the well sometimes with some of these decisions based on his overall, like, kind of gut feel and his faith in the boys. I mean, you couldn't have faith today in Nat Phillips going up against Zaha. It didn't make any sense whatsoever. And then on top of it, you take Henderson out, which kind of weakens that side, which just kind of compounds itself. And then the response is to play Milner. Wasn't even like he went with Keita and Elliott, which I think would have been a real gamble, but at least you could have said I was trying to offer something different to my midfield. Instead, you rolled out James Milner. And it just didn't make any sense whatsoever.
So, I mean, Bickler, like Mateusz says, Give them the chance. We'd rather see them come off in 10 than play the last 25 and see they're okay. And I think that's kind of like where we're at. I agree with that. I mean, that's how I would do it. But we know Klopp has never done it like that, even in these, like, like cup games and stuff like that in the past. Like we loaded the bench and we were like, let's see what happens first. Then we'll put the big boys in, kind of deal. But I think the bigger issue was we have Fabinho that's really out of form. So we could not even protect him as well as we should. Hence the situation with the goal.
I mean, I just don't. None of it makes sense to me. Like I feel like I feel like I'm living on another planet. I just like so like you're gonna okay. So say in some bizarro world, like starting Nat Phillips is your answer, right? Like I know that Gomez just returned from training. Okay, like. I mean, we saw what Gomez looked like for the last 20 minutes of that game, and it was pretty fucking good. Like, good enough. Like, I thought he was arguably the best. Like, I mean, he probably looked great because, let's be honest, Van Dijk has been subpar for 2 games now. Subpar. Like, I think he looks slow. He looks old. He looks tired. And it's the beginning of the season, and that's scary. But in some bizarre world, say you got to start Nat, right? Tweak the tactics. Like, why are you starting a player who's a championship level player, who is not a highline system center back, and you're not changing anything? You're not even putting a double pivot in front of him. You're not even bringing a midfielder and tucking it inside on top of him. And you're asking Trent to go forward with free range like he normally does, and then sticking a snail behind him. It makes no fucking sense. Like, you cannot. If you're going to stick like that and you're just going to plug and play people, you at least have to change the tactics somewhat. And like the fact that like, this is like, I love Jurgen Klopp. He's a club legend, right? But this has been a criticism of Jurgen Klopp his entire managerial career, that he doesn't have a contingency plan. He does not adjust tactics fluently. And like, at this point, I have to agree with that.
I think here's the thing. Not only defensively, we kind of knew that was going to be an issue, right? You see the lineup, you're like, hey, Zaha, Trent, who's going to cover that? No Handel to cover that side. So like Elliott and, like a Fab that's not his Fab self. I think even in some other ways, as you watch the game, I mean, I was like, oh man, where's Matip when you need him? Because there was so much space. And granted, if probably it's Matip, he's probably not given that space. But when Nat had the ball, Crystal Palace could just sit back and not worry about him really driving towards, the defenders and get him out of that shape. He had so much time on the ball, on the dribble, but he's not a threat. So I think having Gomez there, because they would not be able to do that against Gomez, Gally.
You'd like to believe that they wouldn't be able to. I just think that the way that we saw them respond to the overall tactics, to Paul's point, there was no change whatsoever in shape. There was no response to the personnel that we had. And clearly we started a weakened side. And to not change your tactics at all when you're playing with a 37-year-old in the midfield and a slow and subpar center back pairing, your 5th choice center back, it's a little bit of just straight up arrogance, to the point that if it was anyone else, we'd be questioning like why they did it. And to do that without your captain, I don't know if it has more to do with not having Gomez there as it was just not setting up all the players for success. And like, Van Dijk gets questioned for not cutting off the Zaha play fast enough. I think he doesn't know what it's like to have to play next to a center back who's not tactically able to play the way that he and his partners have for 3+ years. And I think everyone who wanted to see Phillips play with Van Dijk, we saw today why they're not the pairing of center backs, because they don't actually make each other any better. And I feel like that's what you saw today. You saw almost a frustrated Virgil the entire 90 minutes.
To be honest, though, I agree with Bickler where Van Dijk has now looked himself. And, I mean, that goal should go partially to Fab because totally like whiffing it where you should be cutting off that counter. And obviously, Nat's kind of like trying to almost cheat to set the trap, but he can't set the trap and he's chasing. But here's the thing. Van Dijk should be able to close that down. I think normal Van Dijk closes that down, cuts down the angle a lot more, and, at least makes the shots a lot more difficult. He almost looked like he was initially going full speed, and he did not. He was almost like too afraid of the cutback. But even if Zaha cuts back on him because, Van Dijk is coming full speed, I mean, you would hope Phillips by then would catch up because Phillips was tracking back. He was like only 2 steps behind. So it cuts back. Phillips comes back, everybody else comes back, and I think we'd be able to avoid that. I mean, it's kind of like easier, I guess, to go back to these goals and pick and assign blame. But I feel like that he is partially to blame for that as well. That back line has just not been the same, Bickler.
Yeah, no, I have a little bit of a well, first of all, let's just get everybody healthy, right? But I'm also worried about Van Dijk. I mean, you saw that miss in the second half when he was in the box up front, that sort of like half volley where he just swings and absolutely misses. I'm worried, man. I'm worried there's something off with Van Dijk right now. And I don't know what the answer is because I feel the same way about Fabinho. He was better today, but he was still off it for sure. And this is the beginning of the season. This is when everybody should be their sharpest. And it looks like the end of a season for these guys. And that is very, very worrying.